and welcome. This is Anna from Love Brain Reset, and today I'm really happy to have as my guest Michelle Munt. Michelle has a blog called Jumbled Brain, and you can find her on social media as well. If you're watching this and you've had a brain injury, you may already be familiar with Michelle and her work. You may have read her blogs or heard her speaking. So I'll just give you a little bit of background about Michelle. Michelle was in a car accident in December 2014, which caused a diffuse axonal brain injury that wasn't diagnosed properly for over a year. She started a blog as she knew almost nothing about brain injury before it happened, and it occurred to her that there must be thousands of people just like her who didn't understand what is reasonable to expect of a brain injury survivor. Her energies now go into raising awareness of brain injuries and better understanding of brain injury survivors. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to speak to you. And I'm so happy because when I was recovering from my concussion, and this is going back like probably about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I came across your blog and it was just so reassuring to read it. And I read so many of your posts and they really, really encouraged me. And it just feels such an honor to be speaking to you.
Oh, thank you, and I'm just pleased that I was able to help, even if it's just in some small way of just knowing that you're not alone with some of the things that happen and stops you from feeling like you're just crazy.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important because I think it can be a very lonely experience, can't it, having a brain injury? And just, yeah, knowing there's someone out there, and it's not just you, definitely is it's just so nice to know that.
Yeah, I think so. I think I definitely got a lot from talking to other survivors and learning more about their experiences. So yeah, I hope lots of people take that away from what I write as well.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. And you also write for CFG Law, and that's how we know each other because I write about concussion for them, and you do as well. So it was just an amazing, sort of opportunity where I just thought I really must talk to Michelle. So you do that as well, and you also have your own. You have a Facebook group, don't you? It's a
Yes.
really big Facebook group for brain injury survivors. So do you want to
Yes.
share a little bit about that, Michelle?
Yeah, there's about 6,000 members in it now. It's very much as an international group. Um, it's for it's for survivors, whether it's a TBI, whether it's a stroke, whether it's after surgery. It's for their family members who might be trying to learn a little bit more so they better know how to support them, because obviously this doesn't just affect the survivor, it affects everybody in the family and friends. And also there are a few professionals in there as well, so that they can be educated by us a little bit in terms of what we really need from them, and kind of um, help them with their bedside manner and their attitude and that kind of thing. Plus, then occasionally they might be able to drop in and give a little bit of professional insight, which I think sometimes can be really helpful if people are struggling to contact people who can give them the right information. So there are a few of them there who will dip in and out occasionally, and it just might help if anyone's got any specific questions that they're struggling to get answers with.
Brilliant. So that's a lot of people in the group, and it sounds great that it's for so many different types of people, and not just the survivors themselves, but caregivers and people connected with working with people with brain injury. So that's great that you're doing that. And so, Michelle, today we want to talk about relationships, don't we? And
Definitely.
yeah, relationships and brain injury and kind of navigating relationships. So do you want to start us off? Where would you like to go with this?
Um, so it's a really common thread that I find with survivors that they really feel quite often, sadly, they'll feel abandoned by people, where people will just kind of drift out of their lives. And I think that can really cause um, extra distress at a time when we're already going through trauma. And the majority of us, I think, probably also have PTSD that we're struggling with as a result of our injury, as well as um, what the things the organic injury does itself to us. Um, and I think, I don't know whether it's because we always think, well, I wouldn't walk away from someone, or whether it's because Hollywood has always made us feel that other people should rally around us. I don't know. But I think people really feel that they get abandoned, they feel that it's incredibly wrong, that I think, well, this is the time that I really needed you. How did you do this? Um, and without mentioning who it is, I had a similar situation myself after my accident. Um, and I went through all of those feelings, and there was lots of resentment that came up. And I really found that it clouded my thoughts a lot. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and quite frankly, getting really quite angry about it as well. Um, and it took quite a long time to recognize that actually, just because someone walks away or goes quiet, it doesn't make them a bad person. Um, so some people might know, at the same time I was trying to help my dad, who just months after my accident got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and he went downhill quite quickly, really. Um, and this other person basically stopped talking to the pair of us, and I found that incredibly difficult. And it wasn't until I was talking to a neuropsychologist that she said something to me that really made me stop and think, and made me kind of finally recognize a few things. She said to me, so why are you there for your dad, do you think? And I was like, because I have to be. It's like my duty. That's what I've got to do. And she was like, no, it's not. You haven't got to do anything. You're choosing to do it. And
Mhm.
that's where I realized that I needed to accept that just because I was making that decision, it doesn't mean to say that that's a decision that the next person can make.
Mhm.
This other person wasn't in an emotional position where she could cope with us, and I think that's one thing that it's difficult to recognize at the time. But we all have crazy lives these days, right? We're doing a million and one things, whether you're working full time, whether you're also trying to study, whether you're also bringing up children, whether you're also trying to look
Yeah,
after
it's very
elderly
busy, isn't
parents.
it? It's busy for everyone. Yeah.
And then you have to then make choices about what you can and cannot do. And sometimes people just don't have the capacity left to take on something else. And if they can't feel that they can be positive, the best thing they can do is to walk away and let us heal without them. Um, and so I think that's really important, to be able to accept that, because further down the line, me and this other person, we have reconnected, and we're
Mhm.
fine,
Good.
um, because we have stopped holding it against each other of what
Mhm.
happened. It wasn't ideal. Of course, I would always have loved to have for it to have worked out differently. But um, we there's lots of talk about self-care and how we have to look after ourselves, and I think whilst a brain injury is terrible and it's difficult to imagine how anybody else could be going through anything that's bigger than when we're going through a brain injury, they might be at their limit. And so it's good to not hold it against them for going, do you know, I've got responsibilities and things I need to take care of that, uh, so I just can't do this right now. Um, and if we're able to, I know it's uncomfortable, but if we're able to accept that, it opens up for us to not drive ourselves crazy with these kind of negative feelings, because I drove myself nuts with it.
Yeah.
And also then it does mean that if there's ever going to be any room for you to reconnect in the future, if you're not holding on to that negativity, then you can, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah, it leaves the door open, doesn't it,
Yeah,
for some kind of reconciliation maybe down the line.
yeah,
But yeah, but I think people will find that really helpful listening to that, because you obviously worked it through and you've come to a place of understanding, or you came to a place of understanding, and you're very gracious about it. And I think it's great to hear that, that it is possible to reach a place like that, and that, when things do go wrong, it seems out of your control, but you're saying, you made choices to reconnect with that person, to forgive that person, to keep the door open, and so it is possible. So I really take my hat off to you, Michelle. And it's lovely to hear that you've done that, and I think that's a huge encouragement to other people.
yeah. And I think, don't get me wrong, I'm not high and mighty. I I was brought
You're
up
not,
by my
I see you're not
my
at all. So,
my
oh,
I had an Irish mother who always told me revenge is a dish best eaten cold. So I, therefore quite used to holding on to negative feelings a lot. So I don't want anyone to kind of think, well, just because she did it, it doesn't mean to say that I can do it. Believe me, I was exceptionally resentful.
yeah.
I felt so vengeful. Couldn't think of a way to have revenge, but I wish that there
But the
was.
feelings were
Uh,
strong, yeah, and I mean they are.
yeah.
I think you do get upset, and because with a brain injury as well, for a lot of people, your emotions are all over the place, and they
Yes.
are almost out of control, almost frighteningly sort of, um, you know, frighteningly strong, I would say,
Yeah.
and quite
Absolutely.
bewildering at times. Like, why am I feeling like this? And oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. This is like you, and it's hard to put a stopper on things sometimes. I think,
Yeah.
certainly in the early days, I think you learn. I think over time you learn, but as you become more self-aware, you can spot things perhaps, and tell when you're maybe going to fly off the handle, or get very angry or whatever, or have those very strong emotions, and you can start to say, where's that coming from, and why is it happening, and perhaps put in, like, take a breath before you act or whatever. You can stop yourself a bit further along, but it takes time to get to that place. And the reality is that for many people, they do get very upset or angry, and something like a relationship breaking down can certainly cause very strong feelings and strong emotions. So yeah, no, I hear you totally, that yeah, kind of earlier on it was difficult for you.
And
Yeah.
I think it's really heartbreaking that this does happen.
I
It's a fact
agree.
of
Yeah.
life. As we've already said, people have so much going on in their own lives. Sometimes they can't take on the added thing of how maybe we might have had a personality change, or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but at any time of life, when you lose a relationship, when perhaps you weren't ready for the relationship to end. Because if we think
Mhm.
about it, like, we've been to school, we've been at different workplaces, and there'll be loads of people that we were friends with at the time, and then whether we've moved away, we've changed jobs or whatever, those relationships may fizzle out, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah, things come and go, don't they, sometimes? Yeah.
because we're moving on, we're ready for it. But
Yeah.
it's when we feel that we weren't ready for it that it's
Mhm.
much harder,
Yes.
that it feels unnatural. It's come to an unnatural, truncated end.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I do think that does kind of add to our trauma a bit more.
Definitely. And also, I think it's that thing of like you're feeling so awful and you're so in need of support in a way. And when it doesn't come from the places that you think it will, that's difficult to deal with as well.
Yeah,
And yeah, you're kind of expecting a certain level of support and you're not getting it for some reason. And it is
yeah,
upsetting.
yeah, absolutely. Um, and it is really sad because anyone who's watching who's thinking, yeah, I'm going through this, that I can't really think of any survivor that I've spoken to who hasn't gone through this.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened to me as well. And so, yeah, and same here. I mean, I hear it all the time as well.
Yeah,
It's very, very common.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is incredibly sad, but what I want people to take away is it's not any reflection on them, the
Mhm.
survivor, and it's not a reflection on that person necessarily. I mean, yes, it partially is, but it doesn't automatically make people bad people.
Mhm.
You know, we keep getting told a lot about self-care, and um, that sometimes you just have to accept you can't take everything on. As awful as it is, and believe me, we understand it is awful and it isn't nice, and we'd love to think that we could be the bigger person and always be there when someone needs us. But there are times that people can't do it,
Mm.
and what you don't want to do is let that um your disappointment in them eat
Mhm.
you up.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
because that's what I felt I was doing. My negativity, which of course I wasn't talking to this person, so it
Yeah.
wasn't like I could get it out and
Mhm.
change their mind. So all I was doing was holding on to this and keep constantly thinking about it, and hurting myself. It's the only person it was hurting was
Yeah.
me.
That's true. Yeah.
um
Yeah.
so whilst, we get told, try to forgive, and forgiveness is
Mm.
more for you than it is for the person you're trying to forgive, sometimes that message feels a bit contrite and doesn't feel like it lands, or it certainly didn't for
Mhm.
me, I can tell you. Um, there, there is a lot in it. It does mean
Yeah, I think
a
I
lot.
know what you mean. I actually find it really helpful to think that, but when you're in it, it can be really hard to accept that or to go, well, yeah, actually, maybe there's something in that. It's hard when you're in
Yeah,
it, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, because I don't know about other people, but for me, forgiveness kind of always meant that you're now okay with it, or that um, you've kind of got, oh, well, it's okay that they've done that.
Mhm.
Um, and it doesn't necessarily mean that. It doesn't mean that you have to kind of go, oh, well, that's fine that they chose to abandon me at a time when I really needed them.
Mm.
Um, it's about trying to kind of say, okay, that's happened, that's life, and I'm not gonna focus on it anymore.
Yes,
And
that's helpful. Yeah. Yeah.
which
That's
is,
a good way to look at it.
yeah, I've because let's be honest, I'm this person who did it to me. Yes, we reconnected and we're fine. I'll never stop thinking what they did was incredibly hurtful.
Mm.
Um, and I know well, I don't know whether they fully appreciate what their actions did. However, it was a choice that they had to make at that time, and I can choose either to continue to get angry about it and start hurting myself again, or I can just draw a line under it and go, okay, well, let's just see what happens going forward, because
Yeah.
we can't go back and change the past as much as
Hmm.
we want to. Everybody makes mistakes. We're all just human. So yes, it's not nice when someone does it to you, but if you can kind of go, okay, I'm gonna focus on something else, like,
Yeah.
okay, well, how do I take control of my life now? Because you
Hmm.
can't do anything about someone choosing not to
That's
be in
true.
your life.
Yes. You haven't got control over anyone else, but you do have control to over your own life. And I mean, that depends how, what stage you are of your injury or in your recovery. And for some people, that might not feel that they have much control over things. And it may be that they don't at that time. But moving forwards, I think you regain control, don't you, Michelle? I think more and
Mm,
more. And so that is something, it's better to focus your energy, which is often limited anyway after a brain injury, on
exactly.
on that side of things. And I don't know, the things that help, and bringing more joy in your life, all those kind of things. And like you say, not letting your energy be drained by a situation. That's
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
that's difficult. Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful for people to hear. And I would just, when I just listening to you talking about forgiveness, I think it is that thing as well. I mean, I love what you said, and I think you've said everything actually that needs to be said, really. But just one other thing that came into my head was that we're not necessarily saying it's okay that happened. Like you say, it's not kind of like going, oh well, I'll just forget all about it, and pretend it didn't really have an effect on me or anything. Actually, it's good to acknowledge that it upset you, and that it has, yeah, it's good to acknowledge how you felt about it, and the reality that you were hurt or whatever. But like you say, it's choosing to, and we talked about this before, didn't we, in another conversation prior to this, but it's that you're kind of letting go. And I don't mean that in a corny way, because it can sound really corny, can't it? But it is a choice to let that go, like you say, so it doesn't consume you, and so that you can focus on other areas of your life. So
Yeah, and
yeah.
that whole thing of letting go, it is hard.
Mm.
I was definitely someone who genuinely didn't understand how you're supposed to let go of something.
Mm.
So there will be people who will be watching this going, yeah, but I've heard this so many times and I don't understand how to let it go. And, you know, I'm sure myself and Anna would love to have chats with you and help you,
Yeah,
because
it's a
it's,
process. I think it,
it's,
it doesn't happen necessarily in one go. I think you just have to keep, sometimes you have to keep doing it. You have to keep mentally just saying, right, I choose to let go of this. I choose to let go. I choose to move on. And I think yeah, it can take time.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if please, anyone who is out there who is still struggling with this at the moment, it's not that you're doing anything wrong at all. Um, this is a very difficult process to go through, and if you're still in that stage where you are feeling like I was, really resentful, maybe even vengeful, um, we're not saying there's anything wrong with that, because believe me, it was definitely there. I couldn't think of any ways to take revenge, unfortunately or fortunately.
Which probably, yeah, in retrospect, but yeah.
um,
Oh.
but it did take up a lot of my time and energy, and I think the problem with that is, um, like you said, you're using up so much of your own
Mm.
energy, and it's just so destructive, self-destructive. And so yeah, it is very difficult to get past this. So if anyone is out there and going, well, I am still really tearing myself to pieces about this, it's okay, I understand you, and I'm sure that um with the right support, you can get there. Maybe you need to
Yeah.
talk it out with people. Um,
Or
I
help
found
from a
that really
therapist
helpful.
to somebody as well. I think, that's something that can be discussed. I think sometimes people think, oh, you want to be talking about, I don't know, rehab or like occupational therapy or those kind of things, or day-to-day difficulties that you're having. But actually relationships totally comes under that umbrella of support
Yeah,
and therapy and stuff, doesn't it? Because I mean,
absolutely.
that's such an important part of our lives. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I had counselling for a while, um,
yeah, I did too. Yeah.
and it was, this was very much what it was focused on,
Mm,
was this, rather than going, okay, well, I've got this brain injury, and whilst that in itself is awful because it turned my life upside down, I lost my career, etc., etc. Actually, the biggest thing that I needed to focus on and work my way through was this relationship or lack
yeah,
of.
yeah,
And so yeah, definitely it does help to be able to talk to someone who isn't emotionally invested themselves,
hmm, yeah,
and they
exactly.
can.
Someone on the outside who can give a different perspective, and yeah,
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
who isn't there to necessarily, take sides. Of course, they're hearing it from your side, but they're there to try and break it down a little bit more for you
yeah,
and make it a little bit more black and white, take the emotions out of it for
yeah,
you,
definitely,
and
definitely. That is really
that
helpful.
can neutralize a lot of what you're feeling and going through, I think.
Yeah, so you can think more rationally about things rather than emotionally.
Yeah,
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 yeah. Oh no, I think that's really, really helpful, Michelle. And as you're talking there, I'm thinking about how something that I think I did, and that I would recommend to other people doing as well, and I'm sure you did as well. That I've made new friendships since my accident. I've made new friendships. I've lost some, and I've been through that too. And I know exactly what you're talking about when you're speaking about this. But I found that although there were some people who didn't get it. And we'll perhaps talk a little bit about that at the end, because I think it's a lot to do maybe around awareness and people's awareness of brain injury and lack of awareness, let's say. And I think that would be a good thing to touch on a bit later. But some people were more understanding than others in my situation. And I just found myself wanting to spend time with the people who were more understanding and less time with the ones who weren't, because they put me at my ease. They made me feel valuable, valid. They validated me. They accepted me as I was. And there were times when I just didn't feel like myself, and at times I was embarrassed about how I was or whatever. But they kind of just were okay with that. They were accepted me.
yeah,
Um, and so naturally, those friendships were the ones that survived or that developed, and the other ones kind of drifted away, or became less, they just became less strong or whatever. But also, meeting people who didn't know me before the accident, um, and again, you're kind of a different person at each stage of your recovery. Like
yeah,
um, you come across in a different way depending on how well your recovery is going or whatever. And so again, meeting people who didn't know me before, that's been interesting too, and people accepting me as I am or
yeah.
not. And
I
I just
think,
I just try not to get too tied up in it. If someone accepts me, they accept me. If they don't, that's okay. It's
yeah,
not a problem. I walk away. i've
yeah.
got i've got too many other things to do. I want to spend my time with people who make me feel good about myself.
Yeah, there's a real thing there around expectations, isn't there? So if
Yeah.
people knew you before, they have an expectation built on the past experience they have with you as
Yeah.
to how you'll behave, how you'll respond to things, whatever. Whereas someone who's meeting you in the moment now, I would say they wouldn't have no expectations, because of course we all have expectations of what is polite and that sort of
Mm.
thing, but they don't already have this picture built around what they think is right for you. And
Yes, and
so
what your identity is and your
yeah,
personality and who you are and
yeah,
everything. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. I do think rather than just spending your time going, oh, why doesn't my old friend accept me now? Um, if, don't feel afraid to find new friends. And I know that's easier said than done, obviously. Especially doesn't help since we're
Yeah,
still in
COVID
this.
doesn't help with that, does it really?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not like we can go out and just start
No.
talking to people. Well, maybe we can a little bit now, but um, and then that's where again the online community does help.
It's very, yeah, very supportive. Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Yeah, because then it means that the world becomes a much smaller place. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter that someone might not even be in the same country as you; they can still connect with you.
Yeah.
And
And I think just by virtue of having had a brain injury, there is, it's just such a shared experience. And so often there is that connection. And, you want to spend your time with all sorts of different people. You don't necessarily just want to spend your time with people who've had brain injuries, but it's just knowing that there is that when you are with those people, there is that connection, and it does foster new friendships. And I've met some wonderful people online, and through being online and through being in the brain injury community. And it's lovely to know that's there, and that is an important part of my life. But it's also knowing that from that you make friends in your community or at work or whatever you're doing, whatever wherever you are, essentially. You
yeah,
can it might be harder, it might take longer, and obviously with COVID, yeah, it's harder, but it's still doable.
yeah,
And yeah.
yeah, definitely. I think that definitely is a big part, a big step. I think in our healing process in
Yeah.
general. I think. Um, I think everyone has kind of felt a little bit isolated at times,
Hmm.
particularly in this pandemic. Um, but I think, yeah, reaching out as much as you can in the community, if that's where you need to start, right,
Yeah.
is with other brain injury survivors, because
Yeah.
you kind of think they're more likely to kind of get me, right?
Hmm.
But like you said, it doesn't mean to say that that's it. They're the only people you can. Um as your confidence builds, because let's be honest, a lot of this is to do with confidence as
That's
well.
so
When
true. A lot of it is to do with confidence. Yeah.
Yeah, you do
Yeah.
kind of question things like your own self-worth and stuff, don't you?
Mhm.
Especially when other people do seem to have abandoned you. Think, oh my God, I'm
Mhm.
so awful. Why would anyone
Yeah,
want
it
to talk
takes
to
time
me?
to build your confidence, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, definitely start with the community, the brain injury community, because they're much more likely to understand
Mm.
and
Yeah.
show a bit more compassion.
Hmm.
And then as you start thinking, okay, this is good, I'm meeting new people and actually they do accept me, then yeah, then you can start meeting other people, whether you're a mum and you go to different mums groups,
Yeah.
or that you're, I can't think of any other groups right now, but I'm sure there's loads.
Whatever. Yeah. Uh, yeah. No, what a sports thing or whatever, I
Yeah,
don't know,
yeah.
whatever. Yeah. Hobbies. I know what you're saying. Everyone knows what you're saying, Michelle. But yeah, you can branch out, can't you?
Yeah,
And make new connections. And some
yeah,
people are going to
and
be very just going to take you as you are. And I think those are the people you want to spend time with.
yeah, and I think, you know, I think everybody's got something, right? We're used to
Yeah,
hearing a
everybody
lot
struggles with
now.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of talk these days now about autism and how it turns out that lots of people are somewhere on the spectrum that never knew they were, and the world is becoming much more um, understanding of that, or accepting of that.
Hmm.
And so we don't have to constantly wear this brain injury on our shoulder, and immediately think I'm not going to be accepted because of it, um, because that isn't necessarily the case. There will always be, no matter who you are, no matter what stage of life you're in, You will always meet people who won't be able to accept you, but you'll also meet people who can.
Yeah.
So yes, we'll continue to have knockbacks, but so does everybody at any time in their life. So try not to, again, not focus on it, not hold it against yourself. Um, just try, pick yourself up and go on again. And I know that sounds really difficult, and it is really difficult, but it's really important at the same time.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, and I think, Michelle, what you're saying, I think that leads quite well into the awareness topic because, like you're saying, there's been a growing awareness of things like autism and ADHD and people talk about neurodiversity, don't they? And that's wonderful. It's such a great conversation to be having, and it's so great that there's this growing awareness and people being more understanding, more compassionate about these things. But I feel like brain injuries, we're just not quite there yet with brain injury. And I'm
No.
hopeful that it will happen. And I think, with the internet and with social media and everything, and organizations like Headway and Same You and other brain injury organizations, there is a lot of awareness going on, and that's wonderful. But there's more work to be done, a lot of work, and it needs to impact every part of society. It needs to impact schools, it needs to impact workplaces, individuals. Just everybody needs to understand brain injury, because it can happen to anybody at any time of life, or it's going to happen to someone you know. And actually, probably most people listening to this, whether they've had a brain injury or not. So the ones who haven't had a brain injury, uh, obviously they may be a caregiver. You might be a caregiver for somebody, but if you're not, then you'll know somebody who's had a brain injury.
Mm-hmm.
And when I had mine, after that, I suddenly, my husband and I were talking, we're like, oh, that person had a brain injury. I remember that person had a brain injury. And suddenly it was like, oh my gosh, what must they have gone through? They must have gone through something like this. And we were surprised. And then I'll talk to people and they'll go, oh yeah, my daughter had a brain injury, or my husband or my sister or whoever, a friend of mine. And suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, actually lots of people have experienced it at some level or another, but they don't really understand it at a particularly deep level. It's still quite a kind of surface thing. And I think there just needs to be more of an understanding of it, so that people are more accepting of people with brain injuries.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know whether the difference is that conditions that you're born with. I mean, I don't, I know nothing about some of these things really, but whether they're things that you're born with or that happened as a child, and are therefore probably going to be with you for life. Whether people find that they can accept that better in the same way that you can't, you might, I might be able to dye my hair blonde, but I'm never actually going to be a blonde. I can pretend to be one, but I'll never be one. Um, Whether people find it easier to be compassionate to that versus a brain injury where they think, well, it's an injury, you're going to recover somewhat, and therefore they're expecting you to change. I don't know, maybe that has something to do with it. They think that this is a temporary effect, and that one day you'll wake up and you'll be fine. I don't know.
I don't know. I just wonder if it's partly that it's invisible, possibly, unless someone's had physical injuries at the same time.
Yeah,
So a person, and especially if they knew somebody before and that person looks the same, but they might be behaving differently. And I
yeah,
think that's very hard. I think that's the thing that people find hard to accept and hard to understand, because it's
yeah,
not like a broken leg. It's not something really obvious and visible.
yeah,
And also, just because it isn't very much spoken about, it's a bit scary, I think. It's like, this is something I know nothing about. I just feel lost with this. And I just think, or maybe they think, oh my gosh, maybe their idea of brain injury is so negative in their head, like brain injury, that's scary. I don't want to think about that. Maybe at some level, people just don't want to think about it. makes them feel uncomfortable or something.
I think
But I
also
don't think there are lots of reasons. Yeah.
what also doesn't help is for a lot of people, and I'm going to include myself here. The first time we sort of hear about brain injury will be TV programs. You know, it might be that someone was in a fight, suddenly they're in a coma, and oh my gosh, everyone's around their bedside. And one day they wake up and they've got a little bit of amnesia about what happened to them, but they're fine.
Yeah, it's very misleading, isn't it? It's not a very
Yes.
accurate picture of reality.
And I think for a lot of us, that is how we learn about brain injury for quite
Yeah.
a while. And
Yeah.
so
Not the
I
best
think
place to learn about it. Yeah.
I think that kind of doesn't help, because that
Mm.
sets some expectations, and then you get into the thing of then people start thinking, well, are they just hamming it up a bit now? You know,
Yeah.
are they constantly? I get people who say things like, people don't understand why they've got such memory problems or whatever, because they'll be like,
Hmm.
well, how come you can remember to do that, but you didn't remember to do this? Oh, it seems
Mm.
to me that you're using it as an excuse. And I think, yes, that's a lack of understanding, but I also do think that it's where the media aren't helping us where they can.
Mm. Yeah, it's not an accurate depiction of it,
No,
of yeah,
not
how it
at
really is.
all.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, there is work to be done, and I just hope that over time that is something that, becomes that it won't be, if brain injury is mentioned, people will know, oh yeah, okay, that person's got a brain injury, that means this, this, and this, and therefore I need to make those accommodations. I need to understand that, whether that's in a work setting or a social setting, wherever, or in a, even in the health system, even still, that people will just make that connection and then know how to handle it, essentially, and
Yeah,
how to handle somebody, and yeah, with
yeah,
respect, essentially, and
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So
And yeah, so I think my takeaway thing is people aren't inherently bad. Um, there are very few people who have bad intentions. People might do things that have negative consequences, but it isn't because that was their intention. And I
yeah.
think when we're able to kind of go back and go, okay, well, what they did had a nasty outcome, um, because they didn't understand, because they weren't aware. When we're able to say, but that wasn't their intention, they didn't intend to hurt me,
Mm,
then that helps you let go of how that made you feel,
yeah.
I think, a
Yeah,
little bit.
no, I think I think that's a great summary, really, and I think it's a good place to sort of leave things, really. It would leave people with that thought. And I think, we've discussed a lot, and you've shared so many great insights onto this topic, onto the topic of relationships and navigating them. And I know you've got your own experience, several years of experience this, but also your through your writing and through your interactions with other people and through your group as well, and hearing, I'm sure, thousands of stories of this, and I'm sure helping people through it, and knowing what's worked for you, but also what's worked for other people.
Yeah, yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much, Michelle, for joining me today, and
Thank you.
for and for sharing on this topic. And I'm just wondering so if people want to find you online, or read your blog, where do they go?
Okay, so my blog is just jumbledbrain.com, and then the blog specifically is / then blog. I have a Facebook page which is Jumbled Brain, and then on Instagram and on Twitter I'm at Michelle_Munt. Um,
Brilliant.
so yeah, I'm in a lot of Facebook groups, and I'll post blogs up and stuff. So I'm sure I'm sure
people will find
me.
you. Yeah. And I'll put a list as well. I'll list them under this video so that people can contact you. But thank you so much for your time, Michelle. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. And yeah, okay, take care and have a great rest of your day.
Thank
All right.
you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.